Hello, human biology Long Beach students. This is chapter 1, a short lecture video. Most often these lectures, PowerPoints will be longer than what I actually lecture on, and I'll make these videos a little bit shorter because I'll be expecting you to work through the dynamic study modules found in the My Lab and Mastering for each chapter. And just a reminder to, when you get into that My Lab and Mastering in Canvas, when you click on all assignments, you'll be able to see the mastering assignments that you'll receive 5 points for each chapter. You'll also see homework problems. Those are just practice problems for you to work through. And then you'll see the dynamic study modules, which will take you through kind of an integrated study approach to each chapter as well. These lecture videos are just intended to be kind of short summaries of the chapter themselves. So I will go through the PowerPoints a little more quickly than I would if we were meeting for an in-person class, for example. So we'll go through chapter 1. This is humans in the world of biology, and it really goes through just the basic characteristics of all living things, a little bit about evolution, levels of biological organization, the scientific method, and critical thinking to evaluate scientific claims. So all living things contain the molecules of life and include these 4 main groups of macromolecules. Nucleic acids, which will make up your DNA, which is the genetic material, proteins, which are made from amino acids, carbohydrates, which are starches, and lipids that are fats. So all living things contain these 4 molecules of life. This is a picture, a computer-generated model for the nucleic acid DNA, which carries all of our genetic information. So the first kind of characteristic of life is living things contain nucleic acids, proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids, which again are the 4 basic classes of macromolecules. All living things are composed of cells. Living things, because they're composed of cells, can grow and reproduce. And living things use energy and raw materials to carry out metabolism. And metabolism refers to everything, all chemical reactions that occur within the cells of living things. Here are red blood cells in red, which are kind of the biconcave disc-like structures, and my cursor is over a white blood cell in the shape of a spear. White blood cells help with your immune response for fighting off infection and disease, and red blood cells carry oxygen in your body. Living things grow and reproduce is another characteristic of life. So everything reproduces by their own kind. Living things use energy and raw materials. Living things try to maintain homeostasis, and you will come back and see homeostasis throughout the semester. It's the relatively constant and self-correcting internal environment of a living organism. And they do this in response to their environment to try to attain an internal environment that's stable. This can refer to the temperature, the pH of the blood, your blood pressure. Living things respond to their environment. You can see how this chameleon, it's a pretty cool picture, catching and seeing its prey with its extremely long tongue. This is the homeostasis one. The person's body temperature our body temperature always remains about 37 degrees Celsius. That's normal body temperature. 98.6 if we're in Fahrenheit, in spite of any extreme in temperature. Organisms have traits that allow them to survive and reproduce, so populations will evolve over time. This orchid is adapted to live perched on branches of trees, and it uses other plants for support so that it can receive enough sunlight to produce its own food by photosynthesis. So these are some 7 characteristics of all living things summarized here. This is a great video about the characteristics of living things. Because I'm trying to keep these lecture videos a little bit shorter, I won't play them, but I would encourage you to go back, look at my PowerPoint, and they'll all be in the PowerPoint, which you can find in the module. A little bit about evolution. Scientists organize living organisms in a system that demonstrates the way to demonstrate evolutionary relationships and how they've been adapted to survive in the best possible way. Several classification systems have been proposed, and the latest includes these 3 domains. which include bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. Bacteria are unicellular, archaea. Most live in extreme environments. I dealt with archaea when I did a research project in Montana, and we used archaea from the hot springs in Yellowstone. And the eukarya is kind of where what you would normally think everything else fits in: animals, which is us, plants, fungi, mushrooms, and protists. Humans are unique because of a couple things that make us unique, and we focus on these. We have a relatively large brain, we can stand upright on two legs, and we have opposable thumbs, which means we're able to touch our thumb and our index finger together. If we look at the levels of organization, and you should know the order, you should know that atoms are the smallest unit of matter that cannot be broken down any further. Atoms make up cells, which are the smallest units of life because they can reproduce on their own. And cells make up molecules, are composed of molecules, which are the chemical components of cells. And cells may contain organelles, which are like tiny organs that carry out specific functions. Cells with the same function are grouped as tissues. Two or more tissues working together are called organs, and at least two organs working together to perform a function are called an organ system. So your stomach and your liver are a part of your digestive system. And an individual then is a single organism made up of organ systems. And as humans, we have 11 organ systems in our body. Many individuals are grouped within a geographical area are called a population. If these populations interact, they form a community, and a community plus everything physical around them is called an ecosystem. All organisms that exist here on Earth live in the biosphere, and that's the part of life where life is found. So here are these levels of organization. You should know this general order, starting from an atom and working our way all the way up through organ system, individual, to the biosphere. Science specifically is an approach to answering questions through systematic documentation and experimentation. So you should have a good idea what the scientific method is about. It's this systematic, logical approach to gathering information and reaching conclusions. Here are the steps of the scientific method. Simply put, the first step is to make an observation or identify a problem, and then form a hypothesis that provides an explanation to that observation. Then you'll provide a prediction and then an experiment with two groups, a control group and an experimental group, to determine whether that hypothesis can be supported. Both groups should be treated identically except for an independent variable, and that's the factor whose effect the experiment is designed to reveal. You'll reach a conclusion based on results. You'll review statistical significance. So if you want to get farther in science or research, you'll have to take stats, which is a math class that shows you how to create statistics and how to find statistical significance between the differences between groups. You can develop new questions, do additional experiments to refine the conclusion, and then over time, after many experiments have been repeatedly confirmed relating to that hypothesis, a theory can be developed. And that offers a broad-ranging explanation for some aspect of the physical universe. So here's a look at the scientific method, the steps. I'll have you guys work through those. Here's an example of a scientific method involving will eating oatmeal lower your blood cholesterol, and the hypothesis is eating oatmeal lowers blood cholesterol levels. Here's your prediction, and then they performed an experiment, and I think they show graphs here showing blood level LDL cholesterol levels as a type of cholesterol found in the blood over a period of weeks, and looking at different types of oatmeal and the relative amounts of them. So you can see how in general it did lower cholesterol a little bit. Great video about the scientific method, and I'll let you guys watch that on your own. Inductive reasoning involves the accumulation of facts through observation until finally there are enough facts to draw a conclusion or develop a testable hypothesis. And deductive reasoning involves making a general statement, often in the form of an if-then statement, and then drawing more specific conclusions from it. In deductive reasoning, a series of observation leads to a general statement that often sets the stage for further experimentation. So you should know the difference between what inductive reasoning is and deductive reasoning. I'm going to keep going here. Experiments that deal with medicines or other materials are first tested usually on rodents. I used mice when I was doing my research project. If the tests go well, then clinical trials can go to humans, all who must provide informed consent to participate in the studies. In a clinical trial, usually an experimental group will receive different dosages of a drug, and a control group would receive what we call a placebo, which is a substance made to look like the drug being tested. So those people think they're getting the drug, but they're actually just getting a placebo. A double-blind study is what we call when neither researchers nor participants know which group is receiving the treatment. That's probably the best testing and experiment to use to leave out any sort of bias. And epidemiological studies look for patterns that occur in large populations, usually to do with dealing with disease. So if we look at this example, you can read through this. Is the drug safe for use on animals? There'll be clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So they first look at tests on laboratory animals and whether they consider that safe, and then clinical trials usually are when humans come in. This is looking at the population versus the mobile cellular subscriptions. So this is an example of that. Critical thinking using scientific claims. It's always good to use critical thinking skills to analyze information and make wise decisions. So I usually tell my students to always be a skeptic. It's your responsibility to ask questions and make informed decisions. Scientists publish their work in what we call peer-reviewed journals, where before their articles can get published, many people have to review their articles. Not all information found online is relevant, accurate, or even true. I think we all know that. And everyone should remain skeptical and evaluate the source of information. So these are steps in how to identify a reliable website, who's the author, who's the publisher, what's the purpose, and when was the information posted. So in order to become a good scientist, you should do those things. So in this chapter, you should be able to list the characteristics of life and be able to describe how relationships are reflected in modern systems of classification. You should be able to define and give examples of these in that scheme of organization: population, community, ecosystem, and biosphere. And you should maybe be able to design an experiment, but also understand experiments with control and experimental groups that follow the scientific method. And that's it for chapter 1. Thanks for listening.